I remember the day my friend shared the eerie story about the São Cipriano book with me. It was one of those lazy afternoons, and she had a penchant for recounting tales that sent shivers down your spine. This time, she spoke of a legend involving two people who had foolishly read the São Cipriano book, known for its dark magic and curses, in the middle of the countryside. The book was infamous for its malevolent powers, and anyone who dared to read it faced dire consequences. I listened intently, feeling a mix of curiosity and unease as she detailed the fate of those who had interacted with the book. Intrigued and somewhat skeptical, I decided to find out more about these two individuals. The story my friend told lingered in my mind, gnawing at my curiosity. So, I took a trip to the countryside where the incident supposedly took place. I asked around, talking to locals who might have known something about the eerie tale. It didn't take long before I found an old farmer who remembered the story. He told me how the two had secluded themselves in an old barn to read the book, believing they could harness its power. His eyes darkened as he described how their behavior had changed after that day, becoming increasingly erratic and disturbing. After gathering enough information, I felt compelled to visit the barn where the two had read the book. As I approached the dilapidated structure, an unsettling feeling washed over me. The barn stood eerily quiet, its wooden boards creaking in the wind. I entered cautiously, flashlight in hand, the beam cutting through the dust-laden air. I couldn't shake off the feeling of being watched. As I explored, I noticed strange symbols and scorch marks on the walls, remnants of whatever ritual they had attempted. Suddenly, I heard a rustling noise above me. Looking up, my blood ran cold. There, high up near the rafters, were the two individuals, frantically jumping from one high beam to another, as if they were weightless. They moved with unnatural speed and agility, their eyes wild and unseeing. In that moment, I understood the horror that had driven them to this madness. The sight was both mesmerizing and terrifying, and I stood frozen, unable to comprehend how they could survive such falls, let alone climb back up repeatedly. Seeing them leap from such heights with reckless abandon, my immediate instinct was to get them down and help them. However, as I took a step forward, one of them paused mid-jump, turned its head towards me, and let out an eerie, guttural laugh. It was a sound that didn't belong to any human I knew. The other followed suit, their laughter echoing through the barn, sending chills down my spine. Desperate, I shouted at them, asking if they needed help, but my words seemed to fall on deaf ears. Their eyes were empty, devoid of any recognition or humanity. Suddenly, one of them leaped down directly in front of me, landing with a sickening thud but showing no signs of pain or injury. They stared at me, inches from my face, their breath ragged and filled with an unnatural heat. I felt a wave of nausea and fear as they reached out to touch me, their fingers cold and clammy. At that moment, I noticed the second person had climbed even higher, perched on the edge of a rafter. I feared they would jump again, this time possibly to their death. Before I could react, the one in front of me turned abruptly, joining the other in another round of frenzied jumping. Their actions seemed almost mechanical, as if they were puppets controlled by some unseen force. Realizing I couldn't help them alone, I backed out of the barn, my heart pounding in my chest, and ran to get help. Panicked and breathless, I sprinted back to the house, my mind racing with the horrifying images of what I'd just witnessed. Bursting through the door, I shouted for anyone who would listen, trying to explain the madness unfolding in the barn. My words tumbled out in a frantic jumble, but eventually, a few of the workers understood and followed me back to the scene. When we arrived, the barn was eerily silent. The once frenzied individuals were now lying on the ground, motionless and unresponsive. The men I had brought with me cautiously approached, checking for any signs of life. To our relief, they were breathing, but their expressions remained vacant, their eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. We managed to carry them out of the barn and into the house, where we laid them on the floor, unsure of what to do next. One of the older workers suggested calling the local healer, hoping they might have some remedy or understanding of what could have caused such a bizarre and terrifying episode. As we waited, I couldn't shake the feeling of dread that lingered in the air. The healer arrived and examined the two, muttering prayers and making signs to ward off evil. He mentioned that meddling with dark magic, especially something as potent as the Book of Sao Cipriano, could have dire consequences. His words only deepened my unease, as I realized the gravity of what my friend had gotten herself involved in.